So machine gun, ammo capacity 50, reload time 2.5, 5.57. That's on the standard of machine gun support. Activates at the start of battle only if self survives. Affects self and two allies on both sides. I would imagine left and right. Okay. She recovers 1% of caster's final max HP. Do you stack up? Activates after landing 100 normal attacks. Affects all electric code allies. So she has a consistent heal on both sides. So either when she says both sides, it's either on both sides from her position, or it could be the both sides as in like the leftmost and the rightmost side. It could be either or. Not that it matters too much. No, it's any stack. So this is like similar to like Bunny Alice or something. It's pretty useless on regular Drunk Scarlet, but keep in mind Haran. Haran can stack herself. Wait, 15 times on attack, 3%? Oh, wait, never mind. It's only 45% attack. Wait, never mind. That's kind of useless. So even if we can max stacks Haran, it's just 45. It's not even much. You have to kill an enemy first, but then the thing is she can't permanently keep that up. Who else is electric that can stack? Exia is one, but then the thing is you can kind of permanently stack on Exia. Wait, hold up though. Let me see, because Maid Privity drops her stacks very fast. Yeah, no. The thing is, like, even though we can stack, she can stack up. Maid Privity drops this pretty fast. So it's 100 normal attacks, and Maid Privity is 2 seconds. She can keep it up for a little bit, actually. If she has enough ammo, she can upkeep Maid Privity after full burst. Not that it matters too much though, because just if you're using it with Bunny Soda, let's say that, yeah, it doesn't matter as much. Cinderella can stack faster. Yeah, there are definitely units that can take advantage of that, but the way I see it though is typically the units that are increasing the stack count buff are typically better off if it's like some sort of stack that kind of resets to a certain degree and you want to just like have a better upkeep of uptime of it. Okay, because Cinderella's stack though, this takes so it's every 3 seconds for 12. It's 36 seconds. Excess fuel stack on the versus last round stacks might be easier to manage, but it doesn't matter though. You can upkeep Exia easily. Here's one thing I really notice on Nikke right now, where what they're kind of doing is like one element kind of has some sort of where it's kind of leaning towards on. So electric seem to be either HP related or stacking related kind. Fire has a little bit more pierce now, especially after Alice and Asuka, but iron technically was somewhat like that also. Water is slowly having those stacking related now too. There's definitely some form of what they're trying to do with a particular element. No, Moran stacking is different also because the way her stacking works is based on the activation count. It's not a stack that is like a buff. Yeah, so 100 normal attack is still less than 2 seconds. So in theory, she can upkeep any stacking buff that is 2 seconds or more. So to some certain extent, she can technically upkeep that Maid Privity's buff, and that way, like Maid Privity doesn't have to, in between the full burst duration, she doesn't have to stack up also again this skill too. I would say this is the main thing I could see her being used on, but it has to be some form of shotgun team that is not using bunnies or JKs. Can she be with Ein? There's no property of stacking on Ein. Not even the feathers. I don't think those are affected by the stacks. We can test it out. We have units that can actually show the stacks. So Pepper's Burst does increase the stack count of buffs. So if Pepper's Burst doesn't increase Ein's drones, then it's not really. So you see, this left side is the drones. I'm gonna try to wait until it drops down by one. Okay, drop down. I use Pepper. It's not. Nope. So Ein it doesn't work with increasing stack increasers. Sure, she can make Cinderella increase her stack faster, but again, the way I see units that have these kind of increased stack count buffs are great if there's like a unit that constantly refreshes those stacks and or loses those stacks like in a consistent way. And the main unit that I can really think of it is Maid Brevity because she will after a full burst ended, she will start losing this because she can't because you're not hitting anymore. And in theory, if you do have enough ammo, you can upkeep this 100% of the time. This skill too. Well, so right now, if skill one primarily is just the healing part, I know some people would say, "Oh, you could use that for crown," but I guess it's gonna depend on what theme is it with crown that you're gonna end up like using. So let's see. Skill two activates when HP of one of those allies on the both sides is lower than 90%. Affects all allies. Generate the shield with 100 with 10% of the caster's final max HP. So shield, whenever I think of shield, I think of like, oh, we can take advantage of Naga when she gets like that shield buff, but then they're both burst too. But also it requires them to have lower HP than 90%. And the main unit that where you can kind of trigger that lower HP by 90% would be someone like Rouge, because it increases your HP. That means that it would lower their HP, but it increases the max HP or mast. But since she is on her burst, she's a 40 seconds cooldown, then you're definitely gonna need another burst too, regardless. So how to consistently keep this shield? You can have Rouge, Flora, and Naga. So she can kind of pseudo replace Tia. But then what are we replacing this basically? The true damage increase. So if we end up like using Tia for another separate team, but right now the main true damage would be Ein and LaPlus. Isn't that a really good mirror container team for low levels who cannot kill slippers? So this is my mirror container. So I killed mirror container, right? This is the damage distribution. I'm bursting with Cinderella and Ein, and I use Rouge, and then I use Crown. So then you're telling me I would end up replacing Summer Anise. And here's another thing. The healer here, Rouge technically is a pseudo healer already. I think you're just gonna waste your resources at that point. I mean, it can upkeep Crown's through the attack damage buff still, but you're probably not gonna even use her burst in this situation. Although to be fair, like whenever they're buffing like true damage, right? Like you can line it up so that whenever she's doing her burst skill, it will line up to buff the true damage of whoever's bursting. So that means that being a burst 2 like this, you would use the true damage buff when say Ein is bursting. But even then, I wouldn't do that if I'm gonna replace it with Crown. Because keep in mind that for Ein's damage, it's about 50% of it is her basic attack, and then 50% of it is true damage. So you would still want to burst with Crown regardless. So this true damage bonus is, yeah, unless you're only really gonna use the burst to if you really need that healing. But otherwise, like right now, there's no real true damage, just pure true damage unit right now. To a certain degree, it would be Freema. So Freema's treasure ends up making her normal attacks deal true damage. So basically, all her damage ends up being like actual true damage. For units like Laplace or Ein, their true damage isn't their full damage. They have a partial that is their regular attacks, and that one deals basic damage, and part of it is also true damage. If we are to use her, I would probably say some sick idea on this stack count buffs for some weird reason and taking advantage of it rather than like the skill 2, if anything. The skill 2 is really more defensive, and in a lot of situations, really, we're not really thinking about too much defensive now. I think, especially with how solar raids have been going at, if you're weak, then that, yes, that's when you start need defensive units, defensive healings and stuff like that. But typically those weak people also don't have the luxury to spend their resources on a unit that is more seems like for luxury. So it's like a weird scenario here for people. It's like, okay, who needs defensive like units, right? The lower level people. But then, do the lower level people have the luxury to invest in a unit that is like true damage, or would you rather have them invest on like grave or like crown? And yeah, I know the true damage is there, but keep in mind, true damage whenever they get applied to the damage formula. So true damage is gonna be additive to these attack damage, damage to interruption, part damage up, and this is where the pierce damage is also, and true damage should be additive to here also. So then, why would you take true damage buffs when you can take, say, graves instead, or when you take crown instead? Affects when one of the allies on both sides reaches max HP through damaging. The way I'm gonna see like her use, if anything, maybe later down the road in the future, is yeah, sure, the true damage thing. If she can somehow take advantage of the skill 1, skill 2, and we're totally not gonna be using her for her burst skill. And this burst skill is probably more emergency burst skill that like, oh, if you end up like needing healing, so if anything, she would be a flex unit, which I mean, to be fair, whenever it's a 40-second cooldown, yeah, that's gonna be a flex unit anyway. So you're gonna use someone else as burst too. In which case, like the way I best see this is crown. But right now, you can't really take advantage much on the skill 1 or skill 2. It's another one of those like really weird units. There's nothing to use her to synergize with, at the very least, like on the top of my head right now, if I'm trying to think like all the possible different like units, especially electric code with stacking, or taking advantage of the heal, the shield. The ones that could take advantage of the shield would be primarily Naga, right, to give that core damage buff, or the healing that from coming from here, that would be on crown. So it's like, she can be partner with crown, or she can be partner with Naga. That's like, those are things they can do. But then there's also the true damage. Then right now it's primarily Ein in the electric situation for this. But Ein doesn't necessarily have any particular stacking mechanic. It's weird, but I don't know if this would be good also for, the thing is like machine gun is typically bad on PvP, but there are some defensive capabilities here. So this one, I could see it being one of those weird, it can end up being good if there are other units that can take advantage of these mechanics, but those units don't exist. Or at the very least, like, not in the very most obvious way right now that I could think of. If others probably could throw in their ideas, maybe we could look into that, but I'm just trying to think on the top of my head, and I can't think of much where we can take advantage of it other than the units that I've mentioned about. Would you have keep some stacks now? Uh Yes. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. She will upkeep those stacks on maid privity. So what you guys don't understand is this is why Bunny Alice was actually annoying because Bunny Alice was only buffing water. So Bunny Alice is only upkeeping the stacks of the water units. So if Tove isn't proccing it, you could have stacks on Tove and Leona, but and Bunny Alice, but it won't give the stacks on Maid Privity and Bunny Soda. But wait. But the thing is, Tove will give her stacks. So let me try to explain this. So here's the thing, right? So Tove will give this temporary modification stacks to all the units. Every time she procs this 5% chance of activating, it gives the emergency crafted bullets to herself, but then and then she will apply this temporary modification to everybody else. Now here's the thing. Bunny Alice can upkeep this temporary modification to only the water code allies because the way Bunny Alice works is it increases the stack count of buff only for water code allies. Now, come in with Flora, she increases the electric code allies by stack counts of buff. What this does mean is that Tove will give it to Maid Privity, and that here's the thing, here's the issue, right? Tove could drop the stacks. This 5% chance could end up just like not proc at all for 5 seconds. And then basically it would completely drop the temporary modification on Bunny Soda and Maid Privity. That's the biggest issue right now in terms of the shotgun team. Now, if you have Flora, she can keep the temporary modification uptime more consistently for maid privity specifically. And here's what I mentioned also, right? This one, you can upkeep this the skill 2 for maid privity because it lasts for 2 seconds. Machine guns shoot for 60 bullets per second. So within less than 2 seconds, she will be able to upkeep this 100 normal attack up. So she will constantly refresh this on maid privity even after outside of full burst duration. And as long as Flora still has some ammo, she can upkeep that until you next full burst. And then when the next full burst happens, at the very least, you can upkeep this to make sure that you're not you don't have to stack this up again at the beginning of full burst. So you can actually put Flora as a support to the shotgun team where you're making maid privity shine. That's the main team I can really just think of right now. That comp do zero true damage. Like I said, you're not using her because of like this buff shit. You're using it, and what I'm saying is you're gonna use her because of just this. Some unit where you can take advantage of this. I could totally see it in the shotgun team, but yeah, that's like one way to cook it. But if you do use that, right, like who's your burst to? That's another, that's a whole nother thing. And if somehow you're using Tia Naga on a different team, and then you use the shotgun team with like Leona or something, right? Then that's something to consider. Would it also work on Leona's buff on Maid Privity? Yes. Or I believe so because the stacks the ownership starts being going to that person, to the receiver. That's how, yeah. And that the thing is like guilty was kind of like that. That's what guilty was doing in the shotgun team. She was upkeeping the buff, the stacking buff on the wind code allies. So any unit that gets a stacking buff that is applied to them, you can kind of do these increase to stack count buffs, and she can upkeep that on that unit, even though the original unit that's normally applying those buffs don't apply them anymore. But that is primarily on a team where we need maid privity to be the main unit, right? And oh yeah, that's true. And since Flora is kind of like a pseudo healer, she can end up being the she can end up being kind of like the healer. And then even if not, there is also the shield part. So what you can do is you can have your highest attacker right next to her. If the boss tries to attack the highest attacker, she can be the one that's applying those shields and like heals and everything. So yeah, it depends on the boss. So I actually think that we could technically use her. And here's another thing. You only need one copy of her. There's nothing that really scales that much. I mean, there's the healing part, but you know, let's be real here, right? In terms of like the healing, it's either you need it, really need it, or you don't. And then maybe if you really do need it, then maybe just use the burst to for her own for one of the bursts just as a temporary to like ramp up the healing. But on most of the time, I think typically we are able to just, if you can do the mechanics, and that's how solar raids are. If you can do the mechanics, destroy the rocks like for an behemoth, you're able to just kind of do the mechanics and survive, and you don't need a healer. Yeah, at most, the way I would see it is it's a one copy, and this is like where we're gonna start. And really, the way I see it is like the cooking part on the skill one is where I see it, and then she has a little bit of like some form of defensive thing, healing and shield for the team. And yeah, I mean, obviously, if we want a copium of the true damage, but right now, in terms of the true damage capability, there's nothing really. There's no unit that can really, really take advantage of this true damage, at the very least, right now, alongside with her other kits. The way I see it is people that want to try to be creative, that's something on the back of your mind that you can try to play around. One thing to keep in mind though is this might end up being similar to Christmas Mika, because Christmas Mika actually, in case you guys didn't know, she does increase the stackable count buffs for all allies regardless of their type. So technically, this unit has already existed. She can upkeep those buffs also for other units. The downside that's different, however, is Christmas Mika is an SMG. She has to hit 150 normal attacks. It takes 7.5 seconds for her before she can increase the stackable count buff. And so that's why she wasn't used on that, what I was just talking about, because, well, you would have dropped it by then. Here's another thing, too, and just the reality of it. The part where I was talking about the stack counts, right? And how she can upkeep that with Dove. So, you know how Dove is increasing this temporary modification. Reality is people are just gonna reset. So if somehow Dove drops those stacks, like the top players aren't gonna rely on the increasing stack count buffs. This what this does is it'll just make them more consistent. It'll just make the runs more consistent. But reality is like we're just keeping trying to keep that stack count buff increase anyway. And on top of it, let's say that she does upkeep it on maid privity. But what if Dove drops her stacks and you're using maid privity and bunny soda? What happens there is bunny soda won't have the stacks. Yes, maid privity has the stacks, but bunny soda won't have the stacks. So it's still a reset point for the top players regardless. So if anything, what I'm really going at here, the main plus side for Flora is she can likely upkeep maid privity's skill 2 up until the next full burst time reloading. Anyways, that's the Copium Flora team. At the very least, that's the main thing I could think of right now. Otherwise, like I think it's just waiting for probably some other next unit. It's really weird that they're putting all of these like true damage buffers and then like they're not putting in enough like true damage DPS. Like what's up with that? Yeah, at best though, it's a one copy, but I'd like to say right now it's a very copium team. And really, if anything, if you think about it, this is just a food for thought. If you're gonna make a team for her around her, where she's like taking advantage of the stack count buffs or true damage, especially with her being a burst 2 skill, that's 40 seconds. That means she's gonna be taking up that flex spot. What if you just change that flex spot into a another good buffer? You could what if like you just put in Maxwell in the Tove and Bunny Soda team, just have Maxwell, or like just another DPS instead of her. Why not just put Modernia in? So that's the trade-off. You're trying to make this like really weird team when you can just like put in one of the other teams anyway. But yeah, I guess like yeah, if you do want to justify that one copy, if you really want to pull for her, want to justify that one copy, you can think of like what I just said about the stacking and making good use of that stacking. The true damage right now is it's a little bit copium right now.